Welcome to everyone joining us for the October Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board meeting. Today's an important day. We're going to be hearing from the city related to a variety of affordable housing issues, and we're also engaged in our allocation planning. We're going to start the meeting with the roll call, and it looks like there we go. Right, Lena Andrews.
Here.
Tanika Harris.
Here.
Karen Garrett. Ellie Fisher. Councilwoman Deb Gross. Jerome Jackson. Deidre Washington. Marcus Reed. Alan Cisco.
Hi, I'm here.
James Reed.
I'm here.
Adrian Wanaha present. I know that it is frustrating for all of us that we have a large group of vacancies. We continue to work with the mayor's office to address those vacancies. So we appreciate everyone's patience and diligence while we have a small board. We had the minutes circulated. Hopefully everyone had an opportunity to take a look at the September 19th meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, James. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tanika. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any abstentions from the vote? Wonderful. Thank you. Minutes are approved. We do have registered public comment for today. Eric, can you provide access for our public comment?
Yes, so Megan Hammond will be giving public comment. She should be able to freely unmute herself.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Megan Hammond. I'm the Executive Director of the Fair Housing Partnership of Greater Pittsburgh. I want to comment today as we dig into allocating the Housing Opportunity Fund for the next year. As you may already know, a consultant with Race Forward is conducting a case study about how the HOF and other local housing trust funds do or don't advance racial equity outcomes. And in my own discussion with the consultant, I reflected on how the Herculean task of creating the HOF what was and has been only the beginning, because the outcomes of the HOF are rooted in the work that is done year in and year out, wherein the funds are used with intention as opposed to being expended within the status quo of the affordable housing market. And so for today, my hope is for the advisory board to reflect on the overall landscape of the affordable housing needs within Pittsburgh. And a few of those that I want to highlight for today include knowing that the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh's Housing Choice Voucher Program received nearly 12,000 applications during the single week in which its waiting list was open last March. Additionally, the Housing Authority's 2025 voucher payment standards are now posted. Now remember that there are 6 tiers of voucher payment standards, with one being the highest and 6 being the lowest. That's based on the address of the unit. And additionally, the addresses are designated as whether or not they're within an opportunity zone to qualify as a mobility move for voucher families who are participating in the Community Choice Demonstration Program that focuses on families with children aged 13 and under. However, one of the changes that's been proposed with the current Housing Authority voucher payment standards is that developments that are going to be receiving low-income housing tax credits or LIHTC will no longer qualify for the higher rehabilitation payment standard for the first 15 years of the property's development. And so as we look at the developments proposed, we're understanding what vouchers and what payment standards are potentially applicable to those properties. Additionally, within Pittsburgh's Affordable Housing Fund, the URA has created a new program called the Revolving Loan Fund that provides financial support for housing developments that require construction or bridge loans. Remember that the cost of housing development has only gone up in recent years, and developing family-sized units is more expensive. Simultaneously, over the past year, we've seen the rental gap program now have a higher per project loan amount of about $2 million. At the same time, we're grappling with the end of the federal funds regarding COVID-19. And so that has resulted in moments such as the URA's own PGH program for homeownership has stopped accepting applications and is referring interested applicants to the HOS down payment and closing cost program. And simultaneously, the housing stabilization and legal assistance programs cannot pragmatically receive the non-HOS money at the same amounts they've been receiving in recent years from the COVID-19 related funding. And now we're seeing about $2 million from the city of Pittsburgh for legal assistance. And so one of the big questions we're grappling with is, what is the HOS determination of how these types of programs should function, and what are their intended outcomes for them to operate for an entire year with reduced funds from what we've been used to? And so I simply share this information to ask you to thoughtfully pursue the allocation discussion in the context of our larger affordable housing market with an intention that prioritizes both equality and equity. I appreciate your time and your efforts.
Thank you for that, Megan.
So we do have Ellie trying to get into the meeting. I am requesting now if she needs to use a different email to let us know.
Hi, I just got in and
Oh,
I'm
yay!
upside down. So here I am.
Yay!
I think I'll go off video just to spare you the distraction. Thank you.
Well, we're happy to have you, Ellie. Today, what we're going to do is, since we are in a virtual format and some of us might be off camera for different reasons, if we could use the reaction buttons to do a little hand raise, if there's something that we want to bring forward to the group, that would make things, I think, a little bit easier in this virtual format. All right, so Megan has charged us with several different things here, really thinking about the contextual elements of the housing market and the work that we're doing, thinking about issues related to economics and rising cost, and thinking about who we're serving and impacts. So if we can keep those key items in our head for the rest of the discussion, that will be really helpful.
All right, moving on now to some administrative updates, really just one. We're planning for the next HOF Advisory Board meeting to be scheduled for November 14th at 9 a.m. And we chose this particular date because we need this time frame to meet the public comment, the 30-day public comment threshold that we need for the annual allocation plan that is legislated. So that's what we're trying to hit. And because this meeting was delayed, the next meeting will also have to be delayed to that November 14th date. More information about that will come following the meeting. We're working on possibly an in-person location for that meeting, but nothing is settled down yet. So we just wanted to let you know that that is our plan, and that will allow us to hit those legislated requirements for the annual allocation plan.
And we did have a little discussion earlier. This may need to change. We do recognize that members may not be available for that date and time. I would not be joining the group at that date and time if that is the time we're going with. We really want to maximize participation. So, we're looking at that week to hit those benchmarks, but we may have to have a little bit deeper discussion about availability so that we can have largest amount of participation. Alan, did you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I was also trying to figure out the hand gestures. I was just curious. So, is that the same day as the URA board meeting, and does that matter?
It is the same day as the URA board meeting. That is why it's scheduled for 9 a.m. so that we can conclude before the board meeting. But like Adrian said, this is the time that on paper makes sense because while we do, of course, want to maximize advisory board member participation, we also have those strict legislative deadlines that we need to hit as well. So that's something that we're going to talk internally more about and make sure that you guys are in the loop.
Yeah.
So literally all I care about is like if that's the date that works for the most people, that's cool. There's only like seven of us now. We should be able to make something work. But I just want to make sure that doesn't mess up the procedure that's needed for the recommendations to go through the rest of the process they need to go through.
And
Right. Yeah.
sorry, I'll jump in. So the timeline for the draft allocation plan is we will hopefully come up with a draft today. The requirement is a 30-day public comment period. And then we'll come back to the HOF advisory board to vote to finalize the plan. And then it needs to also go to the URA board to finalize the plan before it can go on to the city for legislative reasons. And so we are trying to get finalization of the plan to occur in November with the different board meetings. And so what will happen, whether we have it on the 14th or the 12th or the 13th, is we will put a placeholder item into the URA board's agenda that we will send out 2 days prior to that meeting on the 14th. That will say subject to housing opportunity funds final approval, right? And so what we will present at the board that day will only be what this advisory board has given a final vote to. So hopefully, Alan, maybe that was the question you were getting to, but yeah.
That is exactly what I wanted to make sure of, Kiana, is that knowing that we are the first step of a process that includes other parties downstream, I wanted to just like it felt like very cutting it really close. And so if we need to adjust our schedule, we should, I guess is my position on that so that the rest of the team can follow through.
And Alan, we had spoken just briefly today about the possibility of we do want the 30-day public comment period. That's critical and important. But maybe the 30-day public comment period is still the 30-day public comment period that we meet a little earlier in the week, really finalize our thinking, and then make sure that that additional public comment is available for everyone's consideration before finalizing. So that's why Kiana brought those dates of potentially the 12th or the 13th to the table so that we could have a robust public process, but also have time to synthesize information and make sure that all decisions are made in a timely fashion. So I think that we all are trying to balance those different priorities.
Right. Moving on, we have our Fair Housing Zoning Code Amendment presentation by Deputy Director Andrew Dash and Keith Portugal from the Pittsburgh City Office.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon. My name is Keith Portugal. I'm the relatively new Senior Housing Planner with the Department of City Planning. Unfortunately, Deputy Director Dash is currently at Planning Commission talking about some of the fair housing amendments currently. We had hoped that we would be able to align and he'd be able to slip in and provide this presentation, but he's currently involved with that. So you have me instead. But yes, I'll begin the presentation now. These zone code amendments for housing, and I'm sorry, this is going straight to transient development, but they are born from the 2022 Housing Needs Assessment. The Housing Needs Assessment had a lot to say, but some of the biggest takeaways are that we are losing a lot of our low to moderate income communities of color, primarily Black communities and families. They're being priced out of the city. They're moving to other parts of the county, and we are trying to build housing more overall. Through the recommendations, the amendments that we have include transit-oriented development, as you see here, along with accessory dwelling units, along with an expansion of the inclusionary zoning, which we have in 4 neighborhoods in the city, as well as parking minimum reform and minimum lot size and a minimum lot size per unit reform. So those 5 amendments are here, along with the fair housing amendments. I believe I'm here specifically for the fair housing amendments, but I just wanted to state that they all exist and are being presented around the same time, but not all together. And let me skip through to fair housing, and then we can go back to the other portions as well, should there be time and if there's desire for it.
Sounds good. Just let me know which slide you want me to put us on.
Oh, sure. Sorry. It should be slide 13 and beyond. So I think I was almost there. Or, okay. Do you see? Okay. Oh, maybe not that one. I'm sorry. I thought I had. I thought I was sharing my screen, but I am not.
I'm currently still sharing my screen with the presentation in it, but
I'm sorry. I'm trying to find on my end where it starts compared to what you have there. If you go past a map of the minimum lot size reform, then that should start the fair housing amendments.
There we go. That should be what you're looking for.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about
that. Next page, please. So the purpose of the fair housing amendment is so that our zoning code complies with the 1988 Fair Housing Act. We are trying to rectify any of those mistakes, and right now it as it's written, it does prohibit placing additional zoning requirements on communities. So we're changing that. We're trying to better align with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's standards. In many cases, uses that require licensure will need to obtain them. That's one way we can ensure that we have some oversight. But overall, we're trying to provide additional flexibility and opportunity for development of housing for protected classes. We do want to make it easier for developers and our communities to understand these zoning regulations around group living issues or uses. Sorry. Next slide, please. So these changes around personal care homes are that we're merging, personal care residents and community homes within the zoning code. We're clarifying that this group definition is under residential uses that require state licensure. We are expanding the definition to also permit transitional housing, which includes women's shelters, drug rehabilitation sites, and similar uses that previously have not been addressed in the zoning code. We have both a smaller version of personal care homes in a larger version permitted, which would be similar to multi-unit residential use. And next slide, please. One moment. So what are these changes? They are, for assisted living facilities, they have been expanded to include nursing homes to prevent any conflict with state requirements. So again, it's going to be something that requires licensure. Senior housing is now aligned with multi-unit residential uses. On our end, that makes things a little bit easier in administering the code. And the age of the householder is reduced to 55 years old so that it complies with the Fair Housing Amendments exemption. Multi-suite residential is now aligned with multi-unit uses on a similar scale. And interim housing is a new use that would require permits, and it's for alternative housing typologies. It will require community meetings and must meet certain requirements, which I unfortunately don't have the details to right now. But if you go to the next slide, we do have the proposed zoning change as Council Bill 2024-0701, and it would make community homes a conditional use in all residential zoning districts. Conditional is usually a review process that takes about 6 months and requires approval by Planning Commission and Council. Other such uses are colleges, universities, utility plants, correctional facilities as well. And as mentioned earlier, there is a Planning Commission hearing right now occurring regarding this bill. After Planning Commission, depending on what their recommendation is, we hope to go to Council and have a hearing in November, which would be November 20th around 1:30 p.m. Next slide, please. If you do want to testify at Planning Commission, well, I think it's a little bit too late to do that now. I believe you could still testify via Zoom. But otherwise, I think your next bet would be to do council. If you go to the next slide, please. Here are the details for communicating with council, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So next slide, please. And so we're asking, what is the point of these amendments? Apart from being in line with the Fair Housing Amendments, the federal ones, oh no, I'm sorry. This question is rhetorical, or rather asking about the entire suite of amendments apart from the Fair Housing Amendments. So that is it on the Fair Housing Amendments. Would you like me to go over the other amendments?
I think the key piece that we really just wanted to have the advisory have in mind at the moment was that, there is an interplay between, the dollars available and items related to policy, and that these are important steps that the city is engaging in to increase the housing supply, especially, under our auspice, the affordable housing supply. So for our advisory, really wanting folks to understand what these amendments are designed to do, how we can connect and support, which I'm not sure that we've talked yet about how we could connect and support. We know that we can, make public comment, we can appeal to council, but are there other ways that the advisory could connect, support, engage in order to, bolster this work and make sure that we are setting the stage for that enhanced level of housing stock?
Yes. So we also have an Engage page. And I do have a slide that will provide a QR code if you have not visited our Engage page yet. I should direct you. Oh, yep, perfect. And there are subpages of all the amendments. This would not take you to the Fair Housing Amendment, though. That would be a separate thing. But once you're on Engage, you can search for Fair Housing Amendments. But overall, yes, you can engage with the other suite of amendments of the five. Each amendment has its own subpage with sections for providing input. We also have the text uploaded on all of these pages so that you can review them yourselves for the details. I am constantly monitoring the Engage page. Also, I'm available via email, or if you're working for the city, Teams as well. But certainly around and open to providing more material or discussion as you would require.
Are there questions or any information members of the advisory would like a little deeper dive on?
No, Keith, I appreciate this QR code. So being able to look at this later to reflect and think through that's very helpful. So thank you. And just because it's a public meeting, for the public, if any individuals are watching this later on, how if they have questions, how should they direct their questions?
Yes. Eric, if you go to the next page, it does have my email address. So people can contact me there, or Deputy Director Dash. Additionally, on the Engage page, we do have a list of engagements throughout the City of Pittsburgh that we're constantly updating. If I go there now, I believe we've done most of our engagements, but we do have more in the works. I'm trying to work with Councilman Mosley to do further engagement in District 9. We're trying to do more in the north side of Pittsburgh as well. But yeah, anywhere we continue receiving requests to engage, but we're also looking to do more with the communities through our neighborhood planners. So, City of Planning, we have our strategic planning division, their neighborhood planners. They have around 8 neighborhoods each, or sometimes more. And I'll be working closely with them to get out the word for these amendments prior to Planning Commission and Council. So the rest of October and November.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, we can move forward to the next agenda item. Thank you so much for joining us, Keith.
Thank you so much.
All right, so following that, we are moving on to the annual allocation plan, much anticipated. So we are going to take some time now to talk about the worksheets that you all were able to submit. We'll talk about sort of the information that we were able to pull from that. And hopefully you all will be able to work together and create an annual allocation plan draft. So I'm going to pull up this is our worksheet. So we'll be filling in the left side over here in the totals, and it'll automatically distribute. And then over here on the right is sort of your references. So this is the staff, the URA staff recommendation. This is, taking your numbers and the numbers requested. We as a department came up with the numbers that we saw were best, but they are certainly not the ones that, the advisory board, you have the control to decide what numbers will be the final numbers. Speaking of the advisory board, we have 2 different forms of averages from the worksheets that you all submitted speaking of the 11 members of the advisory board that are currently active. We have we were able to get 8 of those worksheets returned, which is a really good number. So we're very happy to hear that. Um, and then, so basically the way these two averages work, the first average is we averaged each sort of category on their own and then added those up into a total. Um, and then the other average is just simply averaging all of the totals regardless of where they fell into the AMI. So basically the AB average of totals is sort of a little better at factoring in the zeros that were put into some of these categories, which generally skewed it a little lower, but maybe a little bit more accurately, just because some people did fill out only one column as opposed to all of them, which is totally fine. We did say that you could do that. And really what this should be giving you is something of, and again, this is not hard and fast, but something of an upper bound and a lower bound for where you want to be looking. And pretty much across the board, that's true. And then over here in this last column, we have our 2024 allocation, just to remind you of what the advisory board created last year. And, with that, we want to fill up this total category. This is our draft allocation for this year. We want to make this number at the bottom 0. We want to make this number 10 million. And with that, advisory board, please take it away.
All right, so
Oh, you are muted, Adrian.
Sorry. We have many new members, and we're thrilled that we have active new members. As we see here, this is sort of the collective thinking of the advisory to date. And what we really want to do is we want to take a look at these numbers. Do they make sense? Are we missing anything? Is there a concern or an emergent issue that we believe that we're going to be facing in the next year that maybe we haven't talked about to date that would impact these numbers, either to enhance allocations, decrease allocations, or put the advisory in a position where we think that maybe one of these categories or more of these categories no longer really meets the community need? So I would love to hear from our individual members on, when you're looking at this, does it feel like it resonates? It feels like we're, pretty much in line for the most part with where we've been. The HAP program has some variation here that we probably want to talk about. I think that probably comes from programs like Whole Homes and some other funding that's been discussed, whereas in some years may be available, may not be available coming forward. But it seems like there's a relative alignment of what the URA proposed, what the advisory board was thinking. So I really want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak to any key issues that will be critical for us as we're doing our decision making today. And on my screen, I can see Tanika and Alan sort of first in the queue. If either of you would have comments or thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Adrian. Mine is quick. So this is absolutely in alignment with what I was thinking before 5 days ago. My biggest concern right now is, and I know it has not gone for a vote, but the county is recommending tax increases. And that could substantially impact our renters and homeowners who are landlords, which will also really, really impact our renters. Recognizing that I represent Catapult Greater Pittsburgh. A lot of what we do is we deal with crisis situations, and we tackle the things that the government cannot. And so looking at that's going to put a really, really huge strain, knowing that there will be a tax increase. We don't know what it is right now, but right now I believe it's proposed at 43% or 46%, if I'm not mistaken. And don't quote me on that. I was actually about to look it up. It's somewhere in between there. James, you're smiling, so you probably know exactly what it is. But it's very significant, which could impact renters being charged between $200 to $600 more a month. And that is crucial. So looking at HSP, the rental and homeowner crisis prevention, looking at the allocation of 850,000. Again, like I said, this was an alignment up until a few days ago. I really think we need to reconsider because I'm just forecasting. Would like to stay ahead of it. And I believe that this may be the one entity that could really help in to ensure that individuals are not homeless, houseless.
Thank you for that, Tanika.
Adrian,
Alan?
can I quickly clarify for Tanika? The staff recommendation column is what we are recommending for 2025. So in HSP, we have $1.1 million there. And I think what you were looking at was the 2024 allocation or last year's.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're right. Thank you. Definitely. Thank you. Because clearly, yes. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Alan, thoughts?
Yes. Hi, thoughts. So let's see. First thought is like I guess a question for Tanika or anybody else, right? Like, so if we're gonna be thinking about like the upcoming tax increases from the county, and I think like there's still a long way to go before we know what that's gonna look like, right? But if we are concerned about renters, um, then I think that the current distributions on our screen are like not fully funding the legal assistance program, are not sort of fully funding the small landlord fund. And I think so like I think those are like first places to talk about um as we sort of begin this conversation, right? Like the average that you guys present is like, I know we have to start somewhere, but it does kind of um skew what we're looking at. So like I think, yeah, the staff recommendation for legal assistance, for example, like was like 1.3. I think we heard from them last month that they were hoping for like 1.4 or something, along those ballparks, right? This is significantly lower than that if we were to go with either the AB average of 686 or the AB total of 943. Both of them are sort of far under that. So like, and that's just one of the programs that affects potential renters.
Yeah, and Alan, to that point, the fully funded, even utilizing that terminology, one of the things that we will continue to struggle with as the advisory is we're never going to be able to fully fund, quote unquote, anything.
Sure.
There may be numbers that were requested, there may be numbers that we were thinking are in line. But one of the questions we're going to grapple with is going to be there isn't such a thing as fully funding in this.
Yeah. So I retract
case.
the fully funded part, but I like I'm sorry for the language being a little imprecise, but I think my point is that the staff, the provider, and us, I think, are saying that this is an important issue, and we are like we have some work to do to get what is in the blue and the yellow columns on those programs closer to what maybe the need is as described by those three parties.
Certainly, I was just making the point of so not every program gave us their own, on the street overview. The URA is also doing an estimate. Lena may be speaking to this in her comments, but with Rental Gap, one of the things that we've seen is the enhancement in requests. So each request is actually coming in at a higher dollar amount than it would have 5 years ago or even 1 year ago. So this is just one of those tensions that we're going to have is even at the levels where we had a recommendation, that still may fall short of the need. So I was just trying to articulate that point. Lena? Lena, I saw your
You
hand
are
up.
still muted, Lena.
Sorry, I'm talking to myself here in office. So for the veterans of this process, Adrian just addressed exactly, like we can't fund anything to the level that's needed. So these discussions are always really hard. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding the math before we jump in. And I don't think I totally get the difference between AB total and AB average of totals. So Eric, can you just explain that one more time so that I
Yeah,
understand how you did that?
yeah, no worries. It was a little bit confusing, but basically the first time
Can you go
I
to the tab, Eric? Sorry to interrupt you. It might be easier to see it.
Yeah, that's true. So this is the tab I originally did it on. So each of these sort of categories, like the RGP at 30, RGP at 50, RGP at 80, are averaged from each individual person's sheet and then put together as the average there. So then I add up those numbers to equal the total, which is the AB total on the other slide. Whereas this number is the average of totals. So that's just the total calculated on each sheet. I average those as a separate number. So it's just where that averaging is happening creates sort of a different number. And basically the average of totals is just better at factoring in zeros than the totals, which is why all their numbers are a little bit lower. Um, is that any clearer?
Yeah, yeah. My brain is like, I haven't done math enough lately. But yeah, thank you. That is helpful. I do understand.
Okay, perfect.
I do understand. I kind of want to like play around with the spreadsheet and see why they're different. But
It was
because
kind of fun. I'd be
yeah.
happy to take you through it.
That I used to have jobs like that when I was at the URA. So go back to the other page.
Yes,
Because I
absolutely.
think in order for us to have a productive discussion, we need a starting point. Like we need to start with one of these columns, and then we can talk about what we need to tweak. Like that in previous years, that's been the most productive way to get to like an endpoint that we all feel good about. And when I look at this, the AB total, because it uses the funds more than the AB average of totals is missing $2.3 million. So I don't know how people feel about starting with this AB total column and then like looking at the areas where we're very different from the staff recommendation, either above and below. Like, how do people feel like about that as a process?
So, Lena, what we were hoping to do today was just to get more global thoughts from folks first for the
Oh,
lens
okay.
for that deeper dive. So I wanted all of our advisory board members to have that opportunity to speak to anything that they were particularly concerned about, trends, priorities, because sometimes that goes missing when we just start to dive into the total and then we
Hmm.
going back to that. So we just sort of arranged it a little bit differently for this year's discussion.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood what we were doing then.
No, no, not at all. I mean, we could go about this in a variety of different ways. I was just hoping that maybe we could have some of those overarching themes. I think Megan started us with that lens. What are things that we really need to be thinking about when we start to dive into the numbers more deeply? Because that if you remember from prior years, we started diving into the numbers and then the debate started to happen about the priorities or key items that we wanted to be looking at. And that got us sort of in a different loop, which then we had to sort of jump back to. So this year, I was just hoping maybe we could, I know one of the things you've consistently brought up is the increase in cost. So
Hmm.
the development project that we could have funded even a year ago is not going to be the same next year. So keeping that lens of when we talk about these different programs, the variation in dollars means something really significant. It might mean less projects, it might mean less people served, it may mean more people served. So we were just trying to get our finger on the pulse of what were those key lenses we wanted to have on when we dove into the numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to be clear, to sort of piggyback off Adrian, we definitely want those discussions. And that everything she said is absolutely true. But just to clarify, we definitely do want to end today with
With the
numbers
numbers,
that we can
yes.
go off. But I just making sure that the advisory board knows. what exactly our goals are right now. So yeah, we're absolutely having those big overarching discussions, and then hopefully you all are going to be able to jump right into the numbers, and that's what
Okay.
we'll
And
be doing
do
today.
we have like a time frame that we're hoping to? I just don't want to get to a point where we start losing people because it's too like it's already three. So just
That's why I was trying to run through
okay.
folks quickly, and just ask individuals to, give their highlight comments. And I am definitely watching the time. If we as a advisory don't feel that it's valuable to hear from each member about priorities or concerns, we can dive into the numbers, but that did get us off track last year in my recollection.
Okay. Yeah, I missed last year. So sorry.
I
So
appreciate it.
if,
So
if
I've already
folks,
given mine. Alan gave his. So
yeah,
who's next?
so
Ellie.
James, James, Ellie,
Yeah,
I can go. Oh, go ahead, James.
yeah, let me go ahead and jump in. I mean, I think um for this kind of work, I mean, it's no surprise. The challenges that we face are really all of those associated with, creating either new or preserving existing affordable housing. So anything that's going to be, broader patterns that we see in the market that's going to reflect, increased costs on construction side, whether that's materials, labor, finance, permitting, all that kind of stuff, is something that we have to contend with. So when I was going through this worksheet, top of my mind was kind of thinking about how we're really at this inflated cost, this place of inflated costs relative to, the trajectory before the COVID-19 pandemic. And so
Mhm.
everything is that much more expensive. And for us to really help to deliver, a solid, consistent number of units to the market each year, we do need to increase, the amount of funds that we put into any of these deals. And hope that there are other actors at different levels of government and different stakeholder community levels that can sort of match our efforts. So for me, RGP dollars were weighted heavily for me because I think it's just that important to help continue delivering rental units to the market. And then I would say, the twin for me was also thinking about how this impacts existing homeowners and knowing the challenges that Pittsburghers have in general with the housing stock, right? Like the home I bought was built in like 1911, right? And I know that my home is not necessarily old for this region. So those were sort of the bigger sort of macro trends that was driving my line of thought. So I'll pause there and turn it over to Ellie.
Thank you, James.
Thanks. So I was looking at the priorities that I was putting in were the rental gap program, the housing stabilization program. I see a bottomless need in that one. The homeowners assistance program, because the same way I see a bottomless need in that, and then also the legal assistance program. I was trying to divide these out by the dollars going to rental versus homeowner, and then also the dollars going to individuals versus developers,
Hmm.
was the way I was framing it. And I personally, maybe this is getting into the detail part, but I just zeroed out the small landlord fund and the demonstration dollars because I felt like, the small landlord, I think it's great that it's moving along, but it's moving along slow and we're trying it and it still has dollars. And, given the increasing costs, I decided to prioritize putting those dollars into these existing projects versus the demonstration dollars when we haven't spent ours yet this year.
Thank you, Ellie. That's really helpful. So things I'm hearing is direct impact to people is key. Economic trends impacting both individuals and developers is something that we need to be thinking about. How we are looking at, Ellie, your point just brought into my mind. I think the small landlord fund, I think the dedication of that, the intent is preservation And that speaks to James with the new plus the refreshed housing, which is important. And I love that delineation between individuals versus developers and renters versus owners, trying to strike that balance. And Alan, I do see your hand up. We're sort of getting close on time. If this is directly related to the numbers, is it directly related to the numbers? You're shaking your head, yes or no?
I promise it'll be 10 seconds.
Okay.
Just because I didn't say it before, because I dove right into the numbers, which I will not do. When I was making my priorities, something I look strongly at, thank you to Kiana and URA team for getting us like where we are with past funding allocated. Like
Mhm.
I prioritize funding programs that have spent like the higher percentage of their past prioritized of their past allocations, right? So in making hard choices, I chose to fund less the programs that had spent less of their previous allocations. And that is, I think, something that, I would encourage us all to think about.
And that's another key point from last year's discussion was spend down. You want the dollars on the street because dollars on the street have impact. Dollars that don't get spent don't have that impact, whether it's on individuals or developers or projects. So those are wonderful key lenses for us to have on as we start to dive into the numbers. And the numbers are interesting on a variety of levels. I'm going to continue to look at my bigger screen because I don't know about the rest of you, but I have trouble seeing small screen numbers. But the numbers are interesting. They move back and forth each year. As we all know, there's trends in the industry. We have always had a large commitment to rental gap. It has consistently been one of the largest spending programs. Our priorities have shifted to bring the housing stabilization program much closer related to numbers with a much larger investment with the recognition that happened during COVID of the impact on renters and owners when we have these economic variations. So those are two programs that are sort of coming into balance, which weren't in the past, which is interesting to see. So as we dive into the dollars, we are seeing some discrepancies. And I think that those are reflecting priorities changing with the board. And I think those priorities are related to those economic trends. So the small landlord fund has been something that has been heavily debated, as is the demonstration project. I think that those two programs have an intense amount of value, but as to Ellie's point, may feel like they are less impactful on the ground, especially depending on, how we're looking at how many folks would be served and how many units would be impacted. So I've heard from Ellie related to the demonstration dollars and the small landlord fund, but I think that members voted in a way that suggests that maybe those two particular programs are ones that we're grappling with. Would everyone sort of echo that for your allocation experience, that maybe those are two programs that we're having a little bit more of a struggle with conceptualizing and supporting?
Say that again, which two?
The small landlord fund and the demonstration dollars.
No, I didn't have an issue with that. I think it's more of like people. It may have been things. These line items may have been underutilized because individuals didn't know that it was as accessible, right? And the way I viewed demonstration dollars was I viewed it as non-restricted funds. So because it can be utilized for emergencies and those types of things, so I think that those are the most. I think that line item is probably the one that we can do the most with. But the small landlord fund. So what I did was I met with the catapult directors, and I put the spreadsheet on the board because I didn't want to just speak for myself. And so I allowed everyone, explained everything to them, all the documents that the URA sent me, went through that with all the directors at Catapult, and we collectively came together. So what I submitted was on behalf of Catapult. And so thinking about the individuals that we serve on a consistent basis. And so even when, presenting the small landlord fund to them, they were just like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was something that was there. Right. And so just thinking through, I don't, I get what we're saying, but just understanding that some of these lineups may not have been utilized as much because people may not have known what to do with it or how to utilize it. So that's also a piece so that can be skewed. I just didn't want us to stay stuck in that space. I do appreciate, Adrian, how you started us off by asking us like what are some trends, how can we forecast what's happening in the world, how best to make an informed decision. So I do appreciate that line of thinking. I don't like to deal with the past. I recognize the past, but I also think that we need to be thoughtful about what the needs are of the communities that we all represent and the calls that we receive and the emails that we receive on a consistent basis. I know we all do. We all receive those.
Thank you, Tanika. So I'm going to suggest, and this is back to Lena's point, so we have some totals here. We have some recommendations from the staff of the URA. Those are informed by their interface with the programs directly and with providers. We also have these two totals, which I do think can get confusing, the AB total versus the AB average of totals. Recognizing that the funds that we're really working with is $9 million, not $10 million, because that $1 million is in the admin line item. That has been debated many years, but for the purpose of our conversation right now, I would like to keep that as just what we're looking at as the allocation of the $9 million. And when we're looking at the allocation of the $9 million, you'll see in the AB total, we're over the $9 million. And you'll see in the average of totals that we're under. So we're sort of sitting in those columns, sort of a little bit in the middle between blue and yellow, what the board brought forward versus what the URA brought forward. So we can go down through these line by line. I think rental gap, again, is a priority. I think we were very close as an advisory with the URA's recommendation on believing that we needed to be somewhere in between 1.9 and $2.6 million, which that target was at 2 million from the URA's perspective. For me, thinking through this, since this one is so close, I would actually just ask if folks feel comfortable with the URA's recommendation at the $2 million level. And if so, to proceed from there, because I do feel like there is a synergy of thinking in rental gap. And that gives us a little bit more guidance as we're looking at the other funds. And I saw Lena's hand popped up.
Thanks, Adrian. I don't think we should use this AB average of totals column. It's missing $2.3 million just because of the way the math worked. And that's really
we're somewhere in between there.
Well, not even in between, because the blue column is close. It's only $187,000 off. The other one's $2.3 million off, and all the numbers are substantially lower. So like if we use that yellow.
Just to interject and clarify, it's actually
Yeah.
1,187,000 over because we're aiming for the 9 million.
But why does that has a
Oh
1
wait, no,
million.
you're actually correct. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was my mistake.
Yeah. So I think if we use these yellow numbers at all, it's going to skew our discussion.
We can use the blue totals.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I think one of the things that's interesting though about the yellow column is people who zeroed things out, which we don't have the detail on, but I do think that that's an interesting piece of the conversation that we should take a look at next year on our allocation planning. Alan, I also see your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we're starting with the rental gap conversation, like super important as everything is, this is one of those categories where I think we had only sort of spent about 60% of what has been historically allocated to this program. And so seems like, plus, the bond or whatever. So I feel like for me, this is an area where we could scale back a little bit for this year.
So your recommendation, Alan, would be that we looked at a total that was under the $2 million level.
Yeah, my personal recommendation was 1.8. Like that's where I did in my allocation plan.
Do we have discussion related to rental gap and those totals? Lena,
I
I saw
don't,
you pop off.
sorry.
Pop
I
off
did,
of mute, not
I
pop
did.
off as a person.
Yeah, pop off on me, Lena. Do it.
No, I'm not going to. I do not think we should go below the URA staff recommendation on that because they know like the housing bond and the timing of these projects and like it's only $200,000, but
Yeah,
I wouldn't do that.
I'm fine at 2 million.
Do we have, and I apologize, I'm trying to look for hands, but there's more of us than there is space on the screen. Um, and again, we can adjust, but if we feel like that around $2 million, because again, we seem like we had a synergy between the advisory and the URA recommendations on rental gap. So if we feel like we're right around that $2 million mark, makes sense and feels like the right placement, maybe some of these others we want to have a little bit more dialogue about. So if we're okay moving to HSP, I think we also had a really good synergy here between what the URA recommendation was and what the advisory board landed at. So we're about $200,000 off those totals. But I do think the advisory year after year has put a higher priority on the HSP program. So thoughts related to HSP.
I can't figure out how to make a note, but if I could jump in, I think that this
Absolutely.
one's definitely a priority. And my understanding is that there used to be other dollars supporting HSP, and those dollars are no longer around. So the highest that we can manage to make this, I think, would be really helpful for this program, because my understanding is that there aren't other dollars besides HOF. And if URA people want to dispute that, I welcome it, because I'd love that there be more money.
Thanks, Ellie. Natalie Ryan from Action Housing is on the call. She's probably better suited to respond to that comment. Action Housing is the provider for the HSP program. We are in partnership with them for this. And so, Natalie, is that something you could comment on?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not that the funding that also supports rental assistance is gone yet, but it will be during the time that this next allocation happens. So to your point, I think the most support that HSP can get, the better for the community, because there will be much less option out there for rental assistance. And as we've seen since we started spending this year's allocation, just in July, last year's allocation, it was $850,000. We're down at this point to just around $220,000 left as of today, and spending very rapidly. So this year's allocation will likely be gone by the end of November of this year.
Thank you, Natalie. That's very helpful. So we're going to make some slight adjustments to these numbers as we go along. I'm trying to get us to sort of the big bucket consensus for these as we're moving forward. So hearing nothing that conflicts with the advisory board's commitment to what we actually put in our allocation planning, I would suggest we sort of hold at that number that we have there as the advisory board and take a look at the next categories if that feels appropriate. Okay, great.
Well, like Adrian, I think the advisory board seems to have some consensus on bumping this up from the staff recommendation by at least a couple hundred.
Well,
Like,
and that's what I'm using the AB total, Alan.
Oh, all right, so you're gonna put 1.3 in there? Cool.
Yeah, I'm saying for this moment, what I'm hearing is the advisory board is completely comfortable with the AB total.
Correct.
So if we leave it right where it is, and then start to talk about the other categories, if that works. So we have the down payment and closing cost assistance It looks like the AB's perspective was to bump that category up and to actually lower the homeowner repairs, which that is a complete flip from last year, where the repairs program folks had suggested to do a bump up and to do a very slight, if not static, funding for the down payment and closing cost assistance. So that is a slightly different viewpoint from last year. I'd like to sort of talk about those two together because last year's conversation had a lot of intersection between folks being able to stay in their current home, which was the preservation part of the conversation related to repairs, and then new homeowners.
Yeah, this is interesting because that's the exact opposite. I may have been one of the outliers because that's the exact opposite of what I put. I definitely bumped up the HAP was higher than down payment closing costs. And it could be my lens from working at the URA for half of the year, right? Mm-hmm. And so recognizing all of, everything that was coming in, and even with Catapult, with our Tangled Title program, which has now turned more into repair, and knowing how much those repairs cost and the importance of keeping people in their homes. And so, I am shocked to see that AB totals specifically, so I would definitely increase make sure that the amount of the home repairs is definitely at a higher rate than the others. I'm sorry, I'm looking at this screen and my screen, so I apologize. I'm looking at
I also flipped those.
I'm looking at my sheet as well, so that's
and I flipped those as well. I looked at the homeowner assistance program. We had a wonderful influx of money, but we know we also are not getting that same allocation for 2025. So I had the same mindset as you, Tanika, of really thinking about that preservation of folks in their homes and doing that reduction for the homeowner assistance and closing cost. Alan, I see your hand up.
Yeah. So for me, absolutely, I think a lot of people on this call know I spent most of my career working on homeowner assistance programs. I was one of the ones who I think contributed to that number going down a little bit this year. And really it has to do with the fact that I know that like uh down payment and closing cost assistance needs to go up in order to both fill the affordability gap that keeps increasing on these development projects. And that I honestly would I'm not there's the move from the URA managing this program. I imagine there being some transition there. And so I'm sort of anticipating maybe a slower production year this year with that program. That was my rationale on the homeowner side versus on the repair side versus the down payment and closing cost assistance side. I hope I explained that well.
I think you did. Other thoughts on those two program components and their interplay? Or not their interplay? And from the URA, is there anything that you're expecting that would enhance either of these programs that maybe we're not considering or negatively impact either of these programs that we're not considering?
I don't know if it would be helpful for Natalie to speak to this too, because she's familiar with the whole home repair funding and what's happened in that space, if she's still here.
Hi, I am still here.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So we are working actively with Kiana and others at the URA to get the program ready to launch. And I think because of the experience that we have with whole home repairs, I don't think that we'll have trouble spending this allocation or getting up and running once we have some of the programmatic components, which we're anticipating will be ready within the next couple of months. So I don't anticipate a slow production year, I guess is how I would put it.
Well, hearing the comments and hearing from Natalie, I'm going to propose something that the group may or may not agree with. But
Can I just quickly add from the URA perspective? A home ownership program that is not HOF funded, which is own PGH, has gone away or dwindled. And so this down payment and closing cost assistance program may be kind of the only funding available for homeowners in 2025. Just want to add that note there. And then for the HAP program, just to clarification, we are working with Action on the 2024 allocation right now, and the 2025 has not been, we haven't decided that yet, just for a clarification.
Oh, okay, cool. So that's like, okay. I didn't realize that was a year by year plan. Kiana, that makes sense.
Yes, it's a pilot this year, and we'll make a determination about next year after we've got through this year.
Okay.
But just taking everybody's comments to heart, I'm looking at the URA recommendations for down payment and closing cost assistance at $600,000 and for HAP at $3 million. Would the advisory be comfortable taking $93,750 from our recommendation from the down payment and closing cost assistance to meet the $600,000 estimate from the URA and add that to the HAP homeowner repair program to take that program up to closer to $2,400,000? Does that feel like that makes sense?
I think that's good.
I think that's good.
Perfect.
Yeah, like
Eric, could you do that for us? Thank you, Eric. So now we're dropping into for sale development, which we know is a very heavily utilized program. We did add more funds as an advisory when we made our recommendations, a significant amount more funds than what the URA was thinking made an alignment to what the need is and what they're seeing. So we're about $270,000, recommending $270,000 more than what the URA was looking at. So I'm curious as to whether or not that was more just math from each of us in our own individual bubbles doing math, or if there was a significant push where folks thought the for sale development program needed to have that enhanced level of funding.
I'll speak. In disclosure, as somebody has used this program a lot. Not all of the funds were used from the last year's, but it was really only 2 units left over. And the amount of money that goes into the per unit cost for this program has gone up as costs have increased, as we've discussed. And so, I really wanted to fund this more just because in order to get more units out of it. But really, we're a difference of 550 than 750. Like, it's not that big of a difference. And really, that's a difference of 2 units being delivered as well. So, yeah, I'd encourage us to go more on it because there's not that many other sources for funding this sort of thing. And honestly, it doesn't fund a full project either. Like, it still has to be these dollars have to be layered with other dollars in order to deliver affordable housing units.
Well, let's stick a pin in for sale development for a moment.
Well, could we split could we plug 650 in there and just to keep the conversation moving with numbers?
If folks feel that we need to make a significant increase in that particular program, we can certainly make a move. I did hear some, thoughts about the remaining programs, I think legal
Hmm.
assistance has gotten some additional resources, which may be why folks were thinking about a reduction there. We do have some room in the other categories. I think these last set of categories might be where we have more dialogue, which was why I was thinking maybe we stick a
Okay.
pin in for
I
sale
trust you. I
development for a
trust you.
moment.
Go for it.
So let's stick a pin in for sale development. So these actually are the three most contentious categories from the last 2 years. There has been a desire from the advisory to hold demonstration dollars in case there is a significant need. We are going to be talking about 2024 demonstration dollars in a future meeting. So I would ask all of you to also put a pin in 2024 demonstration dollars. And I'll tell you why in a moment. Small landlord fund, there's been some contention about what the program may or may not be able to do. With the changes, we have had an uptake. This is a program that folks have felt strongly about one way or another. The strongly about in favor of preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, but also strongly that is this really something that we should prioritize? Legal assistance has been one of those things that all of us find incredibly valuable. It's just the level of dollars is very high. So that has been something that we've had a lot of debate about. So I'd actually like us to kind of look at these three categories together, and then we'll circle back to for sale development. But I'd like to hear any, strong feelings related to those three categories. And just to let everyone know, demonstration dollars can be used for whatever really we choose to use them for. So those dollars are never wasted. It's been the mindset of trying to, solve problems mid-year or end of year. To Natalie's point, some of the programs run out of dollars. It gives us some flexibility. So there's just been a debate about whether you put the money in early or you put the money in later. But demo dollars have given us that flexibility. So Alan, I do see your hand up, but I'm going to ask James, who's been a little more quiet in this conversation, what his thinking is at this point.
Sure. So, you know, I think my general thoughts behind how I approached these particular categories was really trying to um, think about it from an efficiency of dollars standpoint. Um, and so, for me in particular, looking at the small landlord fund, um, not necessarily arriving at a conclusion that there's, you know, I guess the demand necessary to sort of increase the funding there. I looked at that as something that we could use to offset or augment other categories. Demonstration dollars, I've really generally, Adrian, as you were sort of describing it, kind of framed that as a contingency, sort of a fund contingency to be able to give us the flexibility to kind of meet additional demand throughout the course of a year. And then the legal assistance program, I know that there's, from our previous meetings, there's just been an incredible amount of demand with that. It's something that, you know, I feel quite torn about what's the appropriate level you know, to support it because these services are, really helping folks with critical things related to their current housing status. And so they obviously bring a big impact as folks are, navigating that legal system. Um, but again, that then takes away dollars from other things. So I guess my general thinking, and I'm, going back to my worksheet to kind of give myself the refresher that I need. Um, but was to um, actually cut back a bit on the legal assistance program, thinking about, using funds really to increase development activities. So that was kind of my general thinking about this, but I guess more specifically to how these categories are kind of interplaying on the sheet. Um, I think I would look for, you know, the perhaps less on the small landlord fund than what we have recommended, and maybe even a little bit less than what my colleagues have recommended. But I think deferring to their kind of wisdom, since they're in the weeds with this, is that's something that works for me. And then you know I don't know. I would like to hear other folks' comments or thoughts about the level of funding for legal assistance, because it is such a significant chunk of what's available. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, James. Alan?
I'm happy. I've been talking a lot. If other people want to go first, that's okay, or I can go.
I don't see any other hands
All
up.
right,
Lena,
cool.
I was going to pick on you a little bit to see your thinking as well.
Um, so, and I missed last year's discussion. I do feel like the legal allocation has been really high in recent years, and that there's been a lot of representation from this community in our public comment period. And I
Mhm.
think that's great. But there are other sort of programs that we have that are equally underfunded that don't have as much advocacy representation for some reason. And I do worry we've been swayed a little bit in that direction because we've heard so much from one group. And I hate even saying that because it is super important and it's done really
Mhm.
meaningful things. But as we talk about over and over again, all of these programs are in need. And so so I would be okay with reducing that line item a little bit. It's still way below, I mean, sorry, way above where it was when we started. When we started this, they were like
Yeah.
200,000 or something. So
Mhm.
it's a really important increase, and the impact is huge. But I don't know that we need to keep increasing it. Um, and the small landlord fund, I don't know. I just feel like we've had so much trouble getting people to use it, and it's such a small line item now that like it's not big enough to warrant all of the research it would take to put into we made those changes to the program. I hope that those help. But when something is so small, does it warrant the staff time it takes to like get the word out and get people to participate when we have these other programs that are really already pretty effective and impactful?
Oh my gosh, now it's a flurry of hands. So Tanika, what is your thinking?
Ellie was first. She
Oh,
had her hand raised. I know you. I know it's hard to see. That's why.
yeah, you're
Ellie,
all popping in and out.
muted. Ellie.
I said I've been talking a lot. You go first, Tanika.
Same. Yeah, it's equal. But I think Ellie and I are probably on the same. I'm just gonna like. I think we were kind of thinking the same thing as Lena was talking. Our hands raised at the same time. Um, so hearing all of those things again, representing the groups that I'm representing the community that Catapult deals with from countywide, right? And so looking at the legal assistance program, going back to Adrian, your original question, forecasting things that are happening, what's coming up, which is why I'm believing that there will be an uptick. We will need to use LAP, the legal assistance program, a heck of a lot more. Those emerging needs that are rising, the demonstration dollars are definitely necessary because it allows us to be fluid later on. And when we need to, because those other line items we may need to draw from the demonstration dollars to supplement some of these other additional line items because of what's happening. We have an election season coming on underway. Like there's a lot happening that we don't know. We don't know how things are going to go, and HOF is the answered prayer for a lot of our communities. I'm just being honest. HOF is the answered prayer. No pressure, URA. No pressure at all. The other side of it, though, is that as board members, it is our responsibility to get the word out about these programs. It's not just on the URA. That is our responsibility. So as we're at community meetings, as we're tabling, as our staff are doing things, we are responsible to get the word out about these programs. The other piece is because we don't know what's on the horizon, the small landlord fund, I truly, truly, truly believe, again, I know I was probably the outlier because I put $1 million under small landlord fund. But because remember the demographic and the community that I represent, right, that is necessary. It is a necessary need. We receive phone calls daily at our organization related to landlords trying like, what can I do? I'm either going to have to, increase the rent or I'm gonna have to like let them out. We have an issue, and I'm gonna be very honest. There's an issue with government providing funding to landlords in a timely manner. Section 8 vouchers, all of those pieces. And so landlords aren't able to get things fixed. And so that becomes an issue. And that has been consistent. So until that is remedied, HOF has been an answered prayer. Do you see what I mean? And so like those are some of the things so that's where my thought process is coming from as it relates to that. So the landing the plane, Adrian, landing the plane is that I do think that we need to definitely look more towards a staff recommendation for LAP. And also I'm in agreement with where we are as far as demonstration dollars continuing.
Thank you. Ellie, I think you're going to be the last comment because I have a proposition.
Well, we got to let Alan talk too.
Well, I mean, this is not the end of the conversation. I'm just saying for this moment.
Okay.
You can be the last comment, and then we can dive a little more deeply into the numbers.
I did some math on the small landlord fund, and what's left in the balance, less what's pending, and those notes, which were so helpful, by the way, thank you, is almost $400,000 in the small landlord fund. And I thought, given the momentum that's building very slowly, that would be sufficient for 2025 to spend that. And then I'm still open to funding it in the future. I just thought, given the trends of what I was seeing, the amount left over from 2024 would be sufficient for the small landlord fund. I really see the legal assistance program as one of the best ways to maintain naturally occurring affordable housing in our city. It just like helps families and help stay in their homes. And so as close, or I think I probably put even more than the staff recommendation for this one. It gets us a lot of people as well. And what we really see happening is that people don't get these dollars. They're having to sell their houses, and then they're going to mostly a lot of out-of-town investors. I don't know if you guys heard the thing on the news this morning, but they're no longer affordable housing anymore. And so I just see this as one of the best things that we can do. So I fully support having that big. And then I zeroed out the demonstration, but that's because I'm new and I haven't seen the demonstration used. So I will defer to the rest of the team on that.
Okay, so again, this is not the final word, but I have a proposition. So for sale development, we had the recommendation to add some additional dollars so that we could have more units. I'm about to make a proposal of increasing for sale development $150,000 over top of the URA's recommendation. To Ellie's point, I think what she's saying is incredibly salient. There are dollars that are still there. My recommendation would be on the small landlord fund to reduce that allocation to $100,000. Hearing what we've heard, we want demonstration dollars, but we also don't want them to linger and not be able to have impact. To do a reduction on the demonstration dollars to $200,000. And then to take the balance that gives us from those changes and add those to our AB total into legal assistance, which, if my math is correct, is a bit lower than the URA recommendation, but is a high dollar value, and legal assistance did receive some additional dollars this year. So I think that that gets us a little under the request, but also serves this program at a robust level. And Eric, I apologize because I didn't do the perfect math on that.
And doesn't the math show us that we
Yeah.
have 1.75
Yeah,
left?
Eric.
It would be
Eric,
this
go
big
ahead
value.
and
Ooh,
yeah,
whoopsie,
put
hold on.
1.75 in there.
Let me go back before I ruin everything. There we go. Yeah, I can absolutely do that.
I mean,
But
I
that's
think if we're going to do
No,
that,
no,
we
no,
have
no.
to revisit rental assistance also keeps people in their homes too and prevents people from being evicted. I don't think we should just throw the whole thing. Like,
And I just wanted to put that out as our straw
Okay.
man, Lena. So
yeah,
this
no,
is
I
the
love
dialogue,
I
right?
love that we have a starting point. That makes me really happy, and I think we're close to where we need to be.
And I don't think, wait a minute, how did legal assistance go up to 1.75 million from 1.3 million?
Because they put everything that was left
That
in
was
there.
the balance.
That's what was
That was
left.
the
Yeah.
Oh,
balance
okay.
after your proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's not what I intended.
No, but this
What
is
if
good. This is
But it's a
good.
good
Like
straw
Lena
man,
said,
right?
yeah, no, that's like Lena said, we can then now we can start to this is great. This is great.
I would propose we increase the demonstration dollars to be the staff recommendation since the advisory board seems to be on board with that, and it's movable if one of these programs runs out of money and we need it. It's just another 100,000 to have access to.
So at this point, I cannot see everybody raising their hands. So I'm just gonna start to sort of take okay, so there's a motion on the table. It's not an official motion, but related to the 300,000, restoring the demonstration dollars to the recommendation. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Perfect.
Alan's hand is up.
Yeah, it's okay. I
Sorry.
think so I just wanted to get my 2 cents on the triple programs here at the bottom. Like Ellie, I highly value the legal assistance program for its closeness to people and its effectiveness per capita. And I think the small landlord fund could be zero to me in this year. Um, and I think demo dollars we have last year still, uh, that is another one that I would zero personally in a tough year. So those are my takes. And so I just I wanted to, since the demo dollars are on the table now, I just wanted to get that out there.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go back to legal assistance quickly because the recommendation in the request was at 1.3 million. We seem to really grapple with where these dollars make the most impact. I think that over funding above the recommendation is something that we would want to think about really closely. So I apologize. I created the math that put $1.65 million into legal assistance, which I'm sure they could use. But I do think that we want to maybe
Is that,
a bit
Kiana,
further.
is that a problem? Kiana, is it a problem for us as the advisory committee to recommend more than the staff?
No.
I don't think so. Whatever you recommend is the draft, and we'll get public comment on it.
Okay.
I'm just going to put out there. So legal assistance will maintain their effort at 1.3. They would expand at 1.6. The housing stabilization program outstripped its dollars. So that level to something like the housing assistance program looks a little different because they run out of dollars. So we do have programs that run out of dollars, which was the only point that I was trying to articulate. Lena?
I would like to revisit the homeowner assistance program just because, I had sort of concerns when we initially increased this so much. Because I used to, when we started this, I was like rental gap all the way. Now I've sort of changed a little bit, but
It
because
also
we
runs
had,
out of money.
Yeah, it runs out of money, but we ran the whole home repair program and we were able to fund 3% of the applications that we got from low-income homeowners. And people also have to move out of their homes because they can't afford to make repairs like fixing their roof or replacing windows or whatever. And there are not that many funding sources for this type of work either. And right now, our recommendation is $600,000 below the staff recommendation. So I, I mean, I would like to add a little bit more to this category personally, but I saw the demand for this type of program just through my experience at my own organization.
I
And
agree, Lena.
I completely agree too.
yeah, and I would echo that and sort of touching on Alan's last comment, looking at sort of the balance sheet that we got from the URA for the small landlord fund. If I'm understanding this correctly, there's still a balance of, as of late September of about just shy of 600,000. And so I do think, considering, if I'm reading that correctly, and considering that we're talking about 100,000, it might be worth reallocating that small landlord fund line item up to the housing assistance program and saying that for small landlord fund there is that balance that's available, and if there's demand there, that's certainly enough to sort of drive some projects for the next year.
So I'm going to try to summarize that. It looks like there is $450,000 that is, under, discussion at the moment. So we have taken the funding from HSP is actually looking like we were overfunding beyond what the URA recommended. Would folks be comfortable taking the 450,000 of zeroing out this small landlord fund and setting legal assistance at the recommended level at 1.3 and moving that $450,000 into the HAP program, which would still make it below the URA's recommendation?
Yes, I like that idea.
Yes.
I like it.
Thing.
I would prefer to cut the demo dollars than cut the legal assistance program would be my preference, but it seems like I'm getting outvoted for that.
I actually would like to cut the legal assistance program a little bit more and add more to HSP.
Okay, so there was one proposal on the table, and I'm just trying to summarize. Taking $100,000 from the small landlord fund, and basically zeroing that out to use previous year's allocations. Taking
Do that. Can we do that? Can
350,000.
we do it one at a time? Sorry.
Yes, please.
Taking $350,000 from the legal assistance program to have it sitting at 1.3 and putting those remaining dollars into the homeowner assistance, the homeowner repairs program at increasing that at 450,000. And again, that doesn't mean the conversation is finalized, but if we're looking at that as an advisory, how are we feeling about that?
Better.
And if we're feeling good about it, do we have a motion?
Yeah, I have a question first. Can we get a little preview about what's being thought about for the demonstration dollars for 2024?
Thanks, Ellie.
So with the demo dollars, we could do a variety of things. We could say to the HSP program, we have $400,000 that we would like you to take and utilize because we know you're going to leave the year at a deficit. We could add dollars, enhanced dollars, to the HAP program, which is closed. We could add those dollars to the pilot for the HAP program. We could determine as a board that we wanted to fund a completely different project. We could give those dollars to lab. We have the opportunity, and the dollars don't have to be spent in 2024. So we can allocate those dollars for a new project, to fund a gap in an existing project, to enhance the contract allotment for any of the programs that received an award this year.
What's the amount again? Sorry, you probably said that at the beginning and I was zoned out.
I didn't say it. I think Eric
Oh,
did.
okay. What's our balance in
350.
demo? 350?
400 and
350,000.
350.
For some of you who are new, we used the demo dollars years ago when the Smithfield shelter space was gonna not be able to open in time for the winter season and it needed emergency repairs. We funneled, I think, like $250,000 to be able to get the occupancy permit for that space, in order to open it for the winter season, which allowed people to have a place to go when the temperatures dropped. And that was a little bit controversial because it's a temporary fix. It's not investing in a permanent housing unit, obviously, but I think that was a really good use of our dollars, and we were able to do it because we had these flexible funds. And if nothing like that came up, we could use it in any of these programs. So I don't know that zeroing it out is the best idea. It's basically just placing more rules on those funds.
Mm-hmm.
And it
That's
just
really
gives us less flexibility if there is something that's emergent.
that's smart. That's really smart, Lena. I think and I didn't if we're having a conversation about allocating previous year's funds and keeping an allocation in the 2025 allocation in order to refill that, it's all the same conversation to me and like keeps that flexibility. Love that. Makes a lot of sense.
And the other piece, Alan, to your point, that has been brought up in some of the programming is there's folks that are actually forced out of these opportunities because of something unique about them as a person or a household. The demonstration dollars could also allow us to serve folks we've never served before.
Sure.
And identify that maybe there's a new group that's emerging that we really need to spend more time and attention and dollars on.
And where does that sort of conversation about allocating either those previous unspent allocations, that 350, or in the future, this 300,000, assuming it stays in our recommendation, like what the vehicle for that is just a board meeting?
Yes. So my hope was the December meeting, we will have the demonstration dollars on the agenda so that we can talk about what we still are holding, and what we would like to prioritize going forward.
And so you guys, the group would rather, like, I have a preference to like not sit on money, especially when we're having such a hard time with this stuff. So like my recommendation would be like, let's allocate that stuff to HSP or LAP, things that are going to urgently help people right now. If that's something we argue about in December with last year's allocation or something we argue about now with the future allocation, I'm cool either way. But like that's my sort of position.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do here is to say what is going to happen in 2025. But we do have dollars that we have flexibility with. And this is sort of the debate that we come into in a variety of different years is with the demonstration dollars, what we can do with them. I would like to get those out on the street quickly for what we're holding, and then have them available to next year's grantees and beyond. So that was my hope for the demo dollars of we can really dive more deeply into that in December and make some great decisions so that, all of the organizations that we're working with or emergent issues related to housing can really be a focus for us, a very pointed focus. So
Okay.
we are now at 5 minutes till, and I don't want to bully anybody into making a decision. we have sort of a straw man sitting here. If we have folks that feel confident that this straw man is a strong one and we'd like to support them, then we will take a motion. If there are key changes that we need to make, someone could make a motion with those alternatives.
I move to approve this allocation that's in the total column right now.
I second.
Do we have a second? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Wonderful.
Whoa. We did it.
And I
feel
feel
really
like that was
good about this.
collegial.
This is awesome.
Did this feel like a collegial process? Did folks feel heard?
Absolutely. I don't know what the trepidation was.
I think last year was rough, Tanika. I wasn't there, but
it was a little.
I heard about it.
I feel like there's some PTSD from so I hope this helped. Yeah, no, this was helpful. This was good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. This was a great process. I felt really good about it. Sometimes we just have more to talk about than we have time, so I apologize for anything that we didn't get to discuss. We are hoping for the next HOF advisory board meeting, if you all have 2 more minutes and you could pull out your calendars. On the table, we have the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th, and Kiana can kind of lead us in this conversation. We do want to have a robust comment period, as we said, but we also want to have time for the URA to really see, understand, process our decision making. So if folks can look at calendars and shout out, no hand raising necessary. We have the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th on the table.
12th and 14th are the only days that work for me.
The 12th and the 14th work for you?
Yeah.
But the 13th does not.
13th does not.
Do we have other conflicts, preferences?
Same. I'm the same as her.
12th and 14th?
I can do the 12th, but not between 1 and 3. But the rest of the day is good. And the 14th, yeah. I can do pretty much, I can make any time work on the 14th.
Ellie?
I can make anything work at these days.
I will be tentative for whatever date. There's some things that are going on in personal life, so I will have to catch up with you all about that a little bit later. But you can pencil me in for any day.
Well, that is helpful. Kiana and I will go back and sort of talk through what might make sense. If you are not able to join us, we will take comments, statements, anything that you would like us to bring to the group. I had put that out there last time, and Jerome did give us his viewpoint on the allocation, so we had that in front of us while we were talking. So if there is anything that you want to be brought to the table at the meeting and you can't participate, please just send it to me early and I will make sure that we bring it to the foreground.
Adrian, did you say that you're out on the 14th? Like, should we put a hold on our calendars for the 12th?
I do not need to be with you. This is a strong group. You can certainly facilitate it without me. But if you would prefer that I was there to support the team, then let's look at the 12th.
We prefer you to be there. Yes, we prefer you to be there.
Okay, so Kiana and I will look at the 12th. So yes, put the whole day on hold for the 12th. We'll try to get back to you really quickly with options. It may be a fully virtual meeting. So we do apologize. We know being in person is really great. If we do have to do a virtual meeting though, I know that we can manage in the virtual space successfully as we did today.
Great. I just wanted, before we end, I want to thank Adrian for leading us through this. This was a very thoughtful and healthy process. So thank you for facilitating it. And I think we got to a good conclusion.
I do too. I felt good about it. So if there's anything about this meeting didn't work well, please share with me and we'll adjust for next time. If someone would like us to adjourn and would like to make that motion, we will accept it at this time.
So moved.
I'll motion.
I beat you. I beat you out.
Wonderful. Thank you all. We appreciate you. This is incredibly valuable, and we're looking forward to next time.